This is Diana Sullivan in Austin, Texas, and today I'm going to teach on my LK150. This is a machine that I often wish that beginners would get when they're starting to machine knit. The reason is I've seen beginners give up because they had the wrong machine. Maybe they got a deal on a machine, but it was not working, and they don't even know it's not working. They just think machine knitting is miserable. Or maybe they got a machine with tiny needles and they can barely see what it's doing. This machine is inexpensive enough, brand new, that you could buy one and you know it's all there and that it works. And I'm not a dealer, so I don't have a dog in that fight. It's also portable, and it's easy to see the needles. The needles are nice and big. It's very popular, so you can find plenty of other people who know how to use it and have lessons. And also it uses common yarns. Right now I have it threaded up with a sport weight yarn that you could get even at a big box store, so you could probably use yarn you have. It makes a knitted fabric with a nice hand knit look that is a comfortable weight to wear. So today I'm going to show weaving. Now I'm using the weaver, which is a gadget that KrisKrafter is making now. I've taught weaving on YouTube before on non-patterning machines, and it was a whole different process, much more manual. This automates it a little bit. It's always fun to review new gadgets when they come out, and Kris has a nice video, but I thought I'd show how I use it. And I've been playing with it in conjunction with one of her other gadgets, the Needle Beetle. It's a patterning gadget. This is a non-patterning machine, so it's kind of cool that you can add things later. Now, people always ask me which machines you can use these on, and the weaver comes with instructions, and it includes a list of machines. It has to fit on the machine exactly. It is not going to work on machines that are not on Kris's list. So Kris's list includes the LK150, the LK140, the LK100, the Zippy 90, and the GK370. And if your machine is a metal bed, this is plastic, if your machine is a metal bed, it's not going to work on it. So this is for the LK machines primarily. Now let's cast on. I'm going to cast on over 40 needles, and I'm going to do a quick easy cast on because we're knitting a swatch. So I brought out every other needle. I'm threading the machine with the group 3 sport weight yarn. I'm on tension 4.5. The knitting machine has a little dial, and when you turn it to bigger numbers, you get bigger stitches, just like hand knitters get bigger stitches with a bigger needle. It comes with this weighted comb, the machine does. So I'm going to put that on, and there's a little hook for catching the loose end of the yarn. I'll do that too. And then I'm bringing out the in-between needles and knitting a few rows. This will just get me started. And there's the knitting forming with the purl side facing my body. Now, how do we weave? The first thing is to find a yarn for weaving, and I was really happy with this group 4 fuzzy yarn. So I'm going to demonstrate with it today. You can use a thicker yarn, a novelty yarn, a hairy, slubby, bumpy yarn. You'll just have to swatch and see how it does, but I really liked this stuff. Weaving yarn goes a long way, so this is a great way to use up bits of novelty yarn. So to do a very simple weave, I am just going to bring out every other needle and weave the yarn over and under every other needle. And here's how to do it in an automated way. I'm laying the yarn on top of the needles, taking the weaver, putting it on the bed so that this red dot on the side here is right in front of this needle number strip. Slide across while pulling the yarn down a little bit, and guess what? With the row, that yarn is woven in between the spaces between the stitches. Now, we can do it in both directions. I've got the ball of weaving yarn on the floor, and here is the end coming from the ball of yarn. So again, I'm going to pick out every other needle, lay the yarn across the top, run the weaver, and then knit the row. And here I go again. Now here's a tip. I have found to take the yarn that I laid across, push it back toward the machine a bit, and give it a slight tug. You need a little tension on it. The Weaver kit came with some knitting bobbins, and I really like this kind of bobbin, but I have not been using bobbins. I've been pulling down with my hand. I realized very quickly that with this ivory yarn, I was getting texture but not much design. So I went and got my scrap yarn worsted weight basket to see what I had. Now here's some weird stuff that is left over from knitting one of those DMC hats with the little toy on top. I hang on to all these bits and use them for waste yarn. Well, let's try this for weaving. So here I go. Same pattern, putting the orange yarn in, and running the weaver. Now I've got the orange yarn, and I think it'll show up better for you. So I'll do a pretty good sample so that you can see that. Now, I finished doing a good sized sample of every other needle weaving, and I'm taking the comb off and holding it up so you can see it. The first little section was with the off-white yarn, and what it gave me was texture and not color. Then I put in this funny self-striping hat yarn, and I got these orange vertical stripes, and then it kind of changed to a red-orange color. I think it's just beautiful. So this is very conducive to doing great-looking horizontal stripes. Now I'm going to hang my comb back on, knit a few rows plain, and show you the second basic pattern that you find yourself using over and over when you weave. For this one, when the carriage is on the right, in order to keep track of what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring out needles starting with the end, like I did before, every other needle, and weave that row. Now the weaver goes in the direction that the yarn is going. So my yarn is starting on the left, laying over and going to the right. So this weaver will go in either direction. So I weave that, then I knit my row. Now my carriage is on the left, and when the carriage is on the left, I'm going to start on the second needle on the right and do the every other needle pattern and weave that. And this is a really different look for this stitch. You repeat these two rows for the stitch. Now I'm calling this bird's eye because that seems to be the machine knitting slang for this stitch pattern. And I'll put a few more rows in doing this. So I'm on the left. Start with the second one from the edge on the right. Look what a beautiful design that you get going on every other needle, and I think this yarn turned out to be just wonderful for weaving. Kind of a shame I don't have more of it. I'm going to knit a few rows and then show you another technique. Here's a chart of the every other needle, and you'd repeat this row. The black squares represent needles you would pull out. And here's a chart of the bird's eye, and you would repeat these 2 rows. Now this is kind of a pretty thing. It is an 8-stitch design, and you get to count. And I've got a whole bunch of them on my page here that I came up with. So I'm going to do this one, and I'm going to go ahead and keep my place using a post-it note. Now this is an 8-stitch wide pattern, which is what works with the Needle Beetle, and I'm on row 1. With the Needle Beetle, I only have to pick out the needles for the first 8 needles on the right, and then it repeats that across the work for me. So on my first 8 needles on the right, I have the first, 3rd, and 5th needle, and that's all I have to pick out. Then I take the Needle Beetle, put it on the bed to the right of the work. The Needle Beetle only goes in one direction from right to left. It also only works on that list of plastic bed machines, and it kicks out the needles all the way across, does the counting for me, and helps keep me from making mistakes. So off I go, and it has pulled out needles for the first row of that pattern. I did 2 complete repeats, and here's what I got. So you can see you can do all kinds of interesting patterns with weaving, and if you've got a big old book of knitting stitches for knitting machines, you'll find a lot more. Also, you can get additional information and more patterns over at my blog. So click on over there. I'll post a link, and I think you'll really get a kick out of all the weaving patterns that I've been coming up with. I've got myself some Group 4 brushed acrylic that I think will be really pretty for the next pattern, which is a pull-up pattern. And I'm going to do it in many ways like the last pattern. It's here on my chart, and I'm going to go ahead and put a post-it under row 1 and give myself a little help by watching my row counter as well. So for row 1, I need to pull out, counting from the right. Since Needle Beetle works from the right, I count from the right. Needles 2 and 4. So needle 2 and needle 4. And beetle on across. We'll let Beetle do all of our counting. On the left, I'm a long way from the edge, so I'm going to pull out another needle at the end. And here I am with that hairy stuff. First row, I kind of have to hold both ends. Weave that in and knit my row. Now row 2 is just like row 1 in that I want to pull needles 2 and 4 before I do my weave. Again, I'm getting the end needle since I'm so far from the end, and my yarn, my weaving yarn, is coming from the left, so I'm going to weave from left to right. This is a little less counting, and I'm not even moving the post-it because I can see how many I've done by looking at the horizontal lines. You'll see that in a minute. Again, 2 and 4, and let's count those out with the beetle. The one thing that I do wrong sometimes is I don't have it exactly on the track. Both of these devices need to be on their track. Now I can look at the knitting and see the 4 horizontal lines. I'm going to pick them up with a transfer tool and put them on the needle straight above the center of the loops. At the end, I only have short loops, so I'm going to ignore that and not pick anything up. And I find these knit off easier if I pull the needles that are holding so many loops on out to fully extended or hold position. And knit everybody. And look what we have. We have this really pretty pull-up effect. So now let me do a few more rows of that, because it's a little different. I just did the first 5 rows, so I did 4 rows with these needles pulled. The 5th row was a plain pull it up and knit it row. Now I'm up here on the 6th row, and for the 6th row I'm going to pull needles 6 and 8. So 5 needles that I don't pull, and then I pull the 6th and the 8th. And let's beetle that on across. Now, I'm pretty far from the edge, so after I pull these needles, I realize I won't get a pretty edge unless I pull one more. And wrap the yarn over, do the weave, knit the row, and do it again. The 6th needle and the 8th needle. Let's count those needles out with our beetle. Let's get one more. Do the weave. Knit the row. That's 2 loops. I want 4. So 6 and 8. Count them out with the beetle. Pull the extra one. do the weave. Now I have 3 loops, and I'm checking that just by lifting up and looking. Just an easy way to do. So 6 and 8. Let's have the beetle do our counting. Of course, you could mark needles and pull them by hand. Of course you could. But I've got these toys, and I'm going to use them. Alright, I've got my weave done, and I'm ready to do my pull-ups. And these are in a little different position from the first row. And this one on the end is short, and gee, I don't know that I'm going to pull it up. It's just too short. I'll go over here, and I'll get this one. The reason I had those short ones on the end was I was having to pull an extra needle. I'd rather have the short ones than have the yarn pulling it all out of shape on both edges. Now I've just done one repeat of that, but I want to show you how very pretty the pull-up stitches can be. They're a little bit like bows or butterflies floating on the face of the fabric. There's one more technique I'd like to show you, isolated weaving. And when I say isolated, I don't have to weave all the way across. I could weave in patches. I could even weave with multiple colors of yarn. And let's do some of that. So this is the center right here. And what I'm going to do is pick out 4 needles to the right of center. I'm on every other needle, and I'm going to pick out 4 needles to the left of center. So now I have 8 needles. I'm going to hang some bright red yarn over those 8 needles, and I'm going to weave that and knit across. And here's what I have. I've woven only from here to here. Of course, this beginning end is going to have to be sewn in later, but just for fun, I'll pull it to the back right now so that you can see what I'm doing a little better. It would have to be sewn into the back of the work. Now, last time I had 8 needles, and this time I'm going to have 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Have fun, make your own chart. I'm going over those 7 and weaving them in and knitting the row. This row I'm going to have 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Weaving those in and knitting the row. This row I'll go 5. This row I'll do 4. And then I'll do 3. I'll bet you're wondering how I do the last one. Well, I pull it out and just hang the yarn over it and knit. And I'll knit a few rows so I can hold this up and you can see the design. So there you go. there is a triangle in the middle of the work and another end that needs sewed in. Here are the samples that I did this morning. Here is the every other needle weave, the texture only because I was using pretty much the same color of yarn. It was only slightly different. And then the orange and the bright pink. And then moving up, this was the bird's eye, the every other needle, but then the second row, it's the ones you didn't get on the first row. This was the zigzag design where I counted and used the Needle Beetle. This was the pull-up stitch, and here was the isolated weave. Now, it's really important that you swatch and see if you like your weaving yarn. You can weave with a lot of things that don't knit well, but some things don't weave very well. The brushes have trouble catching them. So this was a weaving yarn I liked a lot that I played with too. I was using an ivory furry yarn on top of a light blue background, and I really hope it shows up for you. So this was the every other needle and the bird's eye. Check out how pretty the pull-up is with the light color on top of the darker background. And this particular pull-up stitch has this little detailed weave area in between the pull-ups. So it almost gives you the sensation of having more colors. And then here's some other designs I tried. Here was isolation. Here was some yarn that my machine did not want to weave. I struggled with it a few rows and said, can't recommend that. That was some homespun I had. And this was a different pull-up design and a different sort of zigzag design that actually has blocks of the ivory color. So there's our little introduction and primer for weaving on the LK150 using the KrisKrafter weaver. Now if you want a weaver or a Needle Beetle, I'll give you a link for that as well in the video description. So have fun and happy knitting. The best compliment you can give me on this video is a thumbs up and a subscription if you're not already subscribed. When you do those things, it improves my YouTube metrics, and good metrics means that YouTube recommends machine knitting videos to more knitters. We're trying to get more knitters to try using these wonderful machines, so I hope you'll do that, and you'll also be notified when I have a new video.